The day after Christmas, Papa summoned Stacy, Christopher John, Little Man, and me into the barn. We had hoped against hope that Mama would not tell him about our trip to the Wallace store, or if she did, that he would forget what he had promised. We should have known better. Mama always told Papa everything, and Papa never forgot anything. After we had received our punishment, we emerged sore and teary-eyed, and watched Papa, Uncle Hammer, and Mr. Morrison climb into the Packard and speed away. Mama said they were going to Vicksburg. "Why Vicksburg, Mama?" asked Stacy. "They've got some business to attend to," she said shortly. "Come on now, get busy. We've got chores to do." In the late afternoon, shortly after the meal had returned, Mr. Jameson arrived. He brought with him a fruit cake sent by Mrs. Jameson and a bag of lemon drops for each of the boys and me. Mama allowed us to say our thanks, then sent us outside. We played for a while in the patches of snow that remained, but when that grew tiresome, I popped into the house to see what was happening. Mama ordered me to pop back out again. "What they doing?" asked the little man. "Looking at a whole bunch of papers," I said, "and Uncle Hammer was signing something." "What kind of papers?" asked Stacy. I shrugged. "I don't know, but Mr. Jameson was saying something about selling the land." "Selling the land?" questioned Stacy. "You sure?" I nodded. "He said, y'all sign them papers and Miss Caroline got no more legal right to this land. Can't sell it, can't sign on it. It'll be in y'all's name, and it'll take both of y'all to do anything with it." "Both of who?" I shrugged again. "Papa and Uncle Hammer, I guess." After a while it grew chilly and we went inside. Mr. Jameson, sitting next to Big Ma, was putting some papers into his briefcase. "I hope you feel better now that that's done, Miss Caroline," he said, his voice a soft mix of Southern aristocracy and Northern schooling. "Hammer and David, they've been taking care of things a long time now," Big Ma said. "Them and Mary works hard to pay the taxes and mortgage on this here place, and I've been wanting to make sure while I'm still breathing that they gets a title to this place under the law without no trouble. I ain't wanting a whole lot of problems after I'm gone about who got rights to this land." She paused a moment, then added, "That happens sometimes, you know." Mr. Jameson nodded. He was a long, thin man in his mid-50s with a perfect lawyer face, so placid that it was difficult to guess whose thoughts lay behind it. The boys and I sat down silently at the study table, and the silence allowed us to stay. I figured that Mr. Jameson would be leaving now. His business was evidently finished, and despite the fact that the family thought well of him, he was not considered a friend in the usual sense, and there seemed no reason for him to stay longer. But now Mr. Jameson put his briefcase back on the floor, indicating that he was not leaving, and looked first at Big Ma and Mama, then across at Papa and Uncle Hammer. "There's talk that some of the people around here are looking to shop in Vicksburg," he said. Big Ma looked around at Papa and Uncle Hammer, but neither of them acknowledged her glance. Their eyes were pinned on Mr. Jameson. "There's talk, too, why folks are looking to shop there." He paused, met Papa's eyes, then Uncle Hammer's, and went on. "As you know, my family has roots in Vicksburg. We've a number of friends there still. I got a call from one of them this morning. Said you were looking to find credit for about 30 families. Papa and Uncle Hammer neither affirmed nor denied this. "You know as well as I do, credit doesn't come easy these days," continued Mr. Jameson. "You expect to get any, you'll need something to back it." "I reckon we know that," said Uncle Hammer. Mr. Jameson glanced at Uncle Hammer and nodded. "I reckoned you did. But as far as I can see, the only thing any of you got to back this credit with is this land, and I'd hate to see you put it up." "Why's that?" asked Uncle Hammer, wary of his interest. "Because you'd lose it." The fire popped and the room grew silent. Then Papa said, "What you getting at?" "I'll back the credit." Again, silence. Mr. Jameson allowed Papa and Uncle Hammer several moments to search for a motive behind his mask-like face. "I'm a Southerner, born and bred, but that doesn't mean I approve of all that goes on here. And there are a lot of other white people who feel the same." "If you and so many others feel that way," said Uncle Hammer with a wry sneer, "then how come them Wallaces aren't in jail?" "Hammer," Big Ma started. "Because," answered Mr. Jameson candidly, "there aren't enough of those same white people who would admit to how they feel. Or even if they did, would hang a white man for killing a black one. It's as simple as that." Uncle Hammer smiled slightly and shook his head, but his eyes showed a grudging respect for Mr. Jameson. "Backing the loan will strictly be a business matter. In the fall, when the crops are in, those people who've bought the goods in Vicksburg will have to pay for them. If they don't, then I'll have to. Of course, as a businessman, I'm hoping that I won't have to put out a penny. My own cash box isn't exactly overflowing, so there'll have to be a credit limit. Still, it would lend me a great deal of satisfaction to know that I was a part of all this." He looked around. "What do you think?" You know it ain't hardly likely, Papa said, that after accounts are figured there'll be any money to pay any debts at all, except those up at the Wallace store. Mr. Jameson nodded knowingly. But the offer still stands. Papa inhaled deeply. Well, then I'd say it's up to those people who'd be buying on your signature. If they don't want to do it, then we got no say in it. We always pay cash. You know if you sign that credit, said Uncle Hammer, you won't be the most popular man down in here. You thought about that? Yes, said Mr. Jameson thoughtfully. My wife and I discussed it fully. We realize what could happen, but I'm just wondering if you do. Besides the fact that a number of white folks around here resent this land you've got and your independent attitude, there's Harlan Granger. Now, I've known Harlan all my life, and he's not going to like this. I wanted to ask Mr. Granger what Mr. Granger had to do with anything, but common sense told me that I would only earn eviction by asking. But then Mr. Jameson went on and explained without any prodding from me. Ever since we were boys, Harlan's lived in the past. His grandmother filled in with all these kinds of tales about the glory of the South before the war. You know, back then the Grangers had one of the biggest plantations in the state, and Spokane County practically belonged to them. And they thought it did, too. They were consulted about everything concerning this area, and they felt it was up to them to see that things worked smoothly according to the law. A law basically for whites. Well, Harlan feels the same now as his grandmother did back then. He also feels strongly about this land, and he resents the fact that you won't sell it back to him. You back the credit with it now, and he'll seize this opportunity to take it from you. You can't count on it. You can count on it. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had grown so quiet I had to lean in forward to hear his next words. And if you continue to encourage people not to shop at the Wallace store, you could still lose it. Don't forget that Harlan leases that store land to the Wallaces and gets a hefty percentage of its revenue. Before he let the Wallaces set up storekeeping, he was only getting his sharecroppers' money. Now he gets a nice bit of Monier's and Harrison's sharecroppers' money too, since both of these plantations are too small to have a store. And he's not hardly going to stand for you interfering with. But even more important than all that, you're pointing the finger right at the Wallaces with this boycott business. You're not only accusing them of murder, which in this case would be only a minor consideration because the man killed was black, but you're saying that they should be punished for it. That they should be punished just as if they had killed a white man. And punishment of a white man for doing a wrong done to a black man would denote equality. Now that is what Harlan Granger absolutely will not permit. Mr. Jameson was silent, waiting. No one else spoke, and he went on again. What John Henry Berry and his brother were accused of, making advances to a white woman, goes against the grain of Harlan Granger and most other white folks in that community more than anything else. You know that. Harlan may not believe in the methods of the Wallaces, but he'll definitely support them. Believe me on that. Mr. Jameson picked up his briefcase, ran his fingers through his graying hair, and met Papa's eyes. The sad thing is, you know in the end you can't beat him or the Wallaces. Papa looked down at the boys and me waiting his reply, then nodded slightly, as if he agreed. Still, he said, I want these children to know we tried, and what we can't do now, maybe one day they will. I do hope that's so, David, murmured Mr. Jameson, going to the door. I truly hope that's so. Right, you pause here in time to answer your questions on the Google form.